Hi everyone, this is Christine Brinker at Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, and I'm here with Katrina Manigan with the City and County of Denver. We're going to start the webinar in just a minute. We'll give people one more minute to sign on. Okay, let's go ahead and get going. Hi everyone again, this is Christine Brinker with Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, and this is our kickoff webinar for developing some potential amendments for the City and County of Denver's process to adopt the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code. I'm here with Katrina Manigan with the City and County of Denver. Katrina, are you there?
I am. Hi, everyone. This is Katrina Manigan with the City and County of Denver's Department of Public Health and Environment. I am part of our climate action team, leading the buildings team with work to solve climate change. So I want to talk through some of the goals that we have for this code adoption cycle and start to outline where we're at in that process and what it is that SWEEP is working with us on, and then we'll take Christine will tell you more about the SWEEP process, and we'll take some questions at the end. So if you go to the next slide, Christine. Denver has some pretty ambitious climate goals laid out in our plan for how we're going to reduce all greenhouse gas emissions 80% by 2050. We have a goal that all new buildings will be net zero energy by 2035. And then we have some goals around electric vehicles, that 15% of vehicle registrations are electric by 2025, 30% are electric by 2030, and 100% of light-duty vehicles are electric by 2050. Our climate action plan for how we're getting to 80% by 2050 was released in July of 2018, so about 6 months ago. If you go to the next slide, Christine, I thought it was also important to show what the latest climate science is telling us that we need to do, because the IPCC actually came out with a report at the end of 2018 that is more recent than our climate action plan, and one of the things that was quoted in there was that the global building stock, as we know, and this is consistent with our plan, is that we know it has to be 80 to 90% lower emissions in 2050. But they also said that that pathway requires all new buildings to be built fossil-free and near zero energy by 2020. So that's faster than our climate action plan, and of course that's what climate science keeps telling us. So if you go to the next slide, Christine, I wanted to just lay out what Denver's process will be. We're adopting a new code in 2019, and here's an outline of that process. The first phase is to develop any proposed amendments, and so that's where we are now in that green box now through the end of April, and anyone may submit an amendment. The amendment process will be detailed on the Community Planning and Development website by early March is what I expect. So the exact details of how and where to submit an amendment will be there. This process that we're explaining to you today is one way to help contribute to submitting amendments, but it's certainly not the only way. We want, as you'll hear, we want to help stakeholders think through and submit some great amendments, but you are always welcome to also submit your own amendments. So here's an overview of the broader process. The code committee and there's multiple code committees. They will start meeting April through August, and they will decide which amendments to the IECC and the other base codes will actually be moved forward. And then there's the code adoption and the City Council process this fall of 2019. So if we go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about what our goals are as the city for developing some amendment proposals to put forward for the committee's consideration. I think we have two really big goals. One is to facilitate the development of amendments that take a significant kind of common sense first step towards net zero energy new construction. Of course, we're not going to go all the way. We have 6 code cycles to get to our goal of net zero by 2035, but we need to take every opportunity we have to push as far as makes sense. And that is the other really key criteria for this process that SWEEP is working on with us, is that we want to find ways that really do also work well for the bottom line of the real estate industry and that are those common sense first steps. So that's where we need all of your help as stakeholders. If you go to the next slide, our 2 partners in this process of developing code amendments are SWEEP, and you'll hear more from Christine. They're really leading all the stakeholder outreach. So SWEEP and the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project are the folks you'll be hearing from most frequently on this, but we also have the New Buildings Institute partnering with us to develop a list of ideas for amendments and to develop actual amendment proposals so that you as stakeholders don't have to do all the heavy lifting to write proposals. What your contribution and what we hope you can bring to this process is to really help us think through which proposals will be really smart to move forward this code cycle, what's doable in Denver, and what's not doable this code cycle, what should wait. So that's where we really need your input, and we hope that these resources will really help you get there. Both SWEEP and the New Buildings Institute are experts in code, so I think we are in good hands to have them as our partners. And with that, I'll turn things over to Christine to tell you more about what this process of developing code amendments with us will look like, and then we're happy to take questions at the end.
Yep, thanks, Katrina. Hold on, let me get my slide to advance. There we go. It's worth reemphasizing that the City and County of Denver is adopting the entire suite of 2018 model codes from the International Code Council, and that includes the building code, mechanical code, etc. One of those is the energy code, which we call the IECC, the International Energy Conservation Code. And then in a separate process from this, the city will be also adopting an optional voluntary green stretch code that will go beyond the energy code, both in terms of energy efficiency and in terms of things that aren't related to energy and energy efficiency. And so this process here that we're talking about today and in our subsequent meetings is going to focus on the energy code and what amendments specifically belong in the energy code. But we can feed ideas from this process into the green stretch code. There will be a code committee that will also be hearing proposed amendments on the green stretch code. So that's kind of a parallel process. But for here, we'll talk about the energy code. And here's our general process for how it's going to go. We'll start out more broad and more general, and then we'll refine it down to some specific proposal language. So our meetings kick off on Friday, February 22nd, all day with commercial in the morning, residential in the afternoon, and then EVs stuck in between those two over lunch. And these meetings are the ideas meetings. NBI, New Buildings Institute that Katrina mentioned, they will bring to those meetings a rather hefty list of ideas that will get us going. They have about a dozen ideas for residential and about 24 ideas for commercial, and those are based on amendments that have gone forward in other cities, things that may be included in the 2021 National IECC, compromises that have been agreed upon between national stakeholder groups for the 2021, and those sorts of things. So they're ideas, but they are fleshed out. They still have some room though for your suggestions and improvements there. So we'll want to hear your feedback and your reactions to those, as well as your prioritization of those. We'll decide which we will want to refine and continue to move forward with, and then which will either be kicked over to the voluntary stretch code or set aside for a future code cycle. And then we'll start thinking about collaboration between organizations and who may want to co-propose some of these with DDPHE. And then also as part of these ideas meetings, we'll want to hear your own ideas if they weren't already covered in one of the ones NBI is bringing forth. And we'll have a lot to talk about. Those of us that love building performance and energy efficiency and codes, we could talk for the whole 3 hours about one single installation number. But we will have to get through them all, and we'll have to move along. So sometimes we'll take conversations offline for some of these elements. For EVs, we'll talk about those over lunch because there may be some proposals for EV ready in residential as well as some in commercial. So that'll be sandwiched in between. And then the other thing that kind of fits in both is multifamily. So those of you that are particularly interested in multifamily will probably have to go to the residential and the commercial, and that's due to how multifamily is defined in the energy code. It says that if it's 3 stories and less, then it's residential. If it's 4 stories and more, it's commercial. But within commercial, there might be some specific multifamily things as well. So that's just kind of everywhere. And then our next step in the process is more refined. We'll be reviewing and refining actual proposal language. So for those meetings, NBI will bring back those ideas from our first meetings that we want to move forward with, and they will have turned those into draft code language for us to improve and tweak. And for these, we split the commercial one into 2 sessions, so we'll have some more time on those, followed by a residential one, each of those 3 hours long. And then as we're going through this in all of these meetings, not everyone has to agree on or even like every proposed amendment, but we still want your feedback and your involvement. Some of these may be co-proposed with DDPHE, like I mentioned, and in fact, that's a good way for showing support for some of the proposals that you particularly like. On the other hand, some amendment ideas may be proposed completely independently from DDPHE by your company or your organization or a group of you, and those might either be stronger or weaker than the ones from DDPHE. As Katrina mentioned, anyone is welcome to submit an amendment into the process on their own. It's a completely public process. In terms of framing the expectations, of course, it's worth remembering that opposing every single amendment probably isn't going to get you too far, given the city's goals for net zero new construction by 2035. They're pretty set that they are going to adopt the 2018 with some strengthening amendments to that. And it's also worth remembering that the city is only going to push as far as is practical and feasible. You could say aggressive yet achievable, and the codes won't be net zero by tomorrow. We are taking concrete steps down that path. So that'll kind of give you an expectation of how those meetings will go and where we're headed. We are going to send materials over email ahead of time for you to look over, at least a few days ahead of each meeting, but we're always aiming for a week ahead. So you can skim those and have a sense of what's coming. And then after each meeting, we'll collect any written feedback that you want to send in up to about a few days after each meeting. And we have all those deadlines set, and we'll clarify those in the meetings themselves. So look for some more emails on that. We did try to separate our distribution lists based on residential or commercial, but that didn't end up working since multifamily is kind of both, and a lot of people were interested in both. So I'm sorry that you'll have to ignore the emails that don't apply to your particular range of expertise, but that's the best that we could do there. Here are the next deadlines. After our ideas meeting and then our refinement and reviewing meeting, we will get the final proposal language from NBI out to everybody by April 12th. And then we'll finalize who wants to be collaborating and co-proposing on each amendment along with DDP by the 26th. And then the IECC Code Committee hearings are due to start on May 13th. And so they'll take all the amendments that we suggest and they will consider them in their committee process and vote them up or down. And then along with all the output from the other code committees, they'll send that all over to City Council at the very end of it. I think that's all of it. Here's my email and my phone. I'm always available to answer any questions on that. If you do want to be involved in this process and you haven't let me know, send me an email and I'll send you that whole list of dates and process by email. And I think with that, we'll see if there are any questions. You can either raise your hand or submit a question into the box. I don't show any questions yet, so give me a minute to see if any show up. Okay, a couple questions starting to come in. What is the city's definition of net zero? Katrina, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, our exact definition of net zero is something that we will certainly still actually have to finalize through a longer term roadmap to exactly where net zero lies. We're looking very closely, of course, at the Department of Energy definitions of net zero, and we've got a definition in the Green Building Ordinance that is the classic definition, where it's a building that produces as much energy as it consumes and it doesn't have any greenhouse gas emissions. And so it's all electric. It's not going to have any natural gas. We know that that's not feasible for all buildings to produce as much as they consume, to have enough solar on site. And so exactly what off-site solar looks like in our final goal for how we get to net zero is something that we're still refining, but something we'd be happy to take input on. We'll probably have a bigger process around exactly what that definition is for what off-site solar or wind or other renewable energy counts and what doesn't count. And maybe to elaborate a little bit more, the challenge with off-site renewable electricity is the classic definition. It ties everything to RECs and owning the RECs for that off-site renewable energy. There are quite a few, though, local off-site renewable electricity options that don't come with RECs today in our market. And so some of those, I think we will want to have a discussion with stakeholders around how much do we prioritize local off-site renewable electricity versus REC ownership in that final definition. So it's really just a question around what off-site renewables look like. The rest of the definition, I think, is much more clear. I hope that answers that question.
Right. The next question, somewhat related to that, how will this be coordinated with Excel's 100% clean energy goals? I'll start on that and Katrina can feed in. The heart of the energy code is on energy efficiency, so to the highest degree that we can reduce total energy usage, it makes it easier to reach the rest with renewable energy. So they really work hand in hand. And Denver is currently on the 2015 IECC, and both that one and the 2018 have a path for solar to be included as part of compliance. The 2018 refines and clarifies how that works, but basically one of the compliance paths is to get a HERS rating. It's called the Energy Rating Index in Energy Code Speak language, and that allows solar to be part of the calculation for your total household energy usage. But that's going to be clarified in the 2018, and each house then still has to have a decent amount of insulation and so forth. So it's not just building a really leaky shack and then slapping solar on top. It's still having some decent efficiency so that they work hand in hand. Katrina, do you want to add anything else about how this feeds in with Excel's 100% clean energy goal?
Yeah, Christine, your answer was great. We're certainly looking at how we can maximize efficiency because we know that that's needed, and then some of why we don't have that definition for how off-site renewables will be handled in our definition of net zero is because we want to get a little further clarity and a little bit further down the road on what Excel's larger grid mix will look like, what their path will be, and we want to make sure that our definition of net zero works in concert with where Excel is headed with the larger grid. So that's some of why we're not there yet, and we'll be developing that offsite renewable definition in concert with Excel and with what's going on with the grid.
Great. Next question, is there a city that has done this already that Denver can model itself after? In fact, there are a number of them, and that's partly where NBI will be bringing its ideas that have already gone forward in other cities, and they're scattered across the country, but basically there's a number of them that are looking at this same pathway and process, which is to take the latest energy code, the 2018 IECC, and build on that or strengthen that or try to take some steps off of that down to net zero by a certain date, and a couple states as well, Washington State, for instance. So they're all looking along those lines and going about it in a similar way. Boulder already has some net zero requirements set into its code, both the city of Boulder and the county of Boulder, and they do it by cranking down the HERS numbers. They started with very large households, 5,000 square feet and up, have to be net zero now, and then gradually over time they'll bring in smaller houses. So that's how Boulder went about doing it. I'm not saying we're modeling ourselves after how Boulder did it, but they are up the road, and then there are a number of other cities in Colorado and throughout the country that are going through this same process. Do you want to add anything there, Katrina?
Yeah, the only thing I might add is that in the meeting on the 22nd, which is really the ideas meetings that day, the New Buildings Institute and SWEEP will be providing that context around any amendment ideas. They're basically pulling all the ideas that others have tried, others have considered nationally, and they'll provide that context of who was it that tried this, who was considering this, so that you as stakeholders have that as you're thinking about which might be the right first step for us to consider here.
Right. Okay, you said you already have some current proposed changes for the next code cycle. When will you make those available to participants? What we have is a list of ideas that could go into this Denver's adoption of the 2018, but some of those ideas come from ideas that other people are feeding into the national code development process. So the next one, the national one is going to be is the 2021. So that process is separate from this, but it is starting up nowish. And so some ideas that are already proposed for that, we can borrow here and do those early, so to speak. Others are just based on ideas that have been proposed or adopted in other cities, and some compromises that have been made between different stakeholders. And so all of those ideas that we have to start off with off the bat, we'll send out to everyone we have on our list, usually a week before each meeting. It might be a few days before each meeting, but we're aiming for a week. So keep your eyes out for those. And then as you skim through those, if you see ideas that aren't on there that you definitely do want to see considered and discussed, then bring those along to the meetings.
That's right. And the only thing I'd add, we do hope to get that initial list of ideas out on Friday. We don't expect that we're going to move forward with all of those ideas by any stretch of the imagination. We just want to provide a resource to stakeholders to think about which steps might be a good fit here and which ones might not be. And that will really be the discussion we'll have on the 22nd, is around what is the right first step among the ideas that are out there.
Okay, still about 9 questions in the queue, 8 maybe. So let's see if we could get through some more of them. Are we entertaining an outcome-based compliance path for 2018? I don't believe that is in the base energy code, the 2018 as it is, but our process will be to take other ideas that you guys bring forth and see if those are worth proposing as an amendment to the model IECC. So if that's something that you want to see, then bring it up at the meeting on the 22nd, or if you can't make that meeting, be sure to send it to us by email. A couple related questions that I'll pass over to Katrina. How does this fit in with Energize Denver and the Denver 2030 district? Someone else asked how it fits in with the green building ordinance and with CPACE. So lots of different Denver and Colorado programs in there that we want to make sure are coordinated.
Great. So Energize Denver has a few elements to it. It's traditionally been really focused on existing buildings and includes our benchmarking ordinance and our education and outreach material for existing buildings. The code work that we're doing here around new buildings will fit under that umbrella, but it won't sort of directly interact with the existing building requirements under that umbrella. The 2030 district is a privately run group of building owners, or it's an independent nonprofit. So mostly focused, again, I believe, on existing buildings, but I don't want to speak for them on how they would interact with this, since it's not a city-run program. And PACE financing can fund improvements in energy efficiency in both existing and new buildings. So PACE is a tool to help building owners achieve the goals the city has in both existing buildings as well as new construction. And then regarding the green building ordinance, that is focused on new buildings. Of course, it's sort of the way the green building ordinance works, it's sort of layered on top of code. So what we're talking about right now is building code for new buildings. The green building ordinance for new buildings is an additional requirement that's kind of beyond code, where there's 8 different options, some of which are energy related and some of which are green space and green roof related. So this is just a discussion around what that base code should be.
Okay. Thanks, Katrina. A couple process-related questions. If we received the email for this webinar, will we be automatically on the list to receive the emails from the upcoming meetings? Yes, unless you tell me otherwise. I'll make sure that everyone on this call is also signed up on the list. Another question is, do we have to register for the meetings on the 22nd? You don't have to register. You can just show up, but it would sure help us a lot to be able to know how many are coming that day. And you don't have to go to that meeting to go to subsequent meetings either, but it might help you stay in tune with what's going on. But we will be sending out materials afterwards. So if you can't make that meeting, you can still be involved in the process. We did add a lunch in between the commercial and residential meetings on the 22nd because we needed a place to squeeze in EVs, as I mentioned before. So that is over lunch. So it might be sending out another email to get a count for who would be there for lunch so we can make sure we order enough. So that's that. Katrina, do you know when will the 2018 codes be officially adopted by the city and when they would go into effect? And do you know if there will be a grace period for projects to continue designing on the 2015?
Yeah, I think that whole process will be outlined on Community Planning and Development's website in early March. I know right now that they expect that codes would be adopted in fall of 2019, and so look for all the details on, how long one could continue to use the old code before moving to this one and such in early March.
Okay, hold on. Let me keep skimming through the questions. Let me read this one. Related to the second slide on addressing energy use of existing building stock, how is Denver planning to reduce greenhouse gases in the large amount of existing buildings which utilize natural gas? These existing buildings have limited electrical infrastructure to support EVs and PVs and may not go through any major renovations prior to 2050. So the question of how to get at existing buildings.
Yeah, so for existing buildings, we do have a different set of goals because, of course, what's achievable is different in existing buildings. So our goals in our 80 by 50 climate action plan for existing buildings are to have them use 30% less energy by 2030 and 50% less energy by 2050, and to reduce heating emissions 50% by 2040. We also have those are for larger buildings. For single family homes, we have some existing home energy efficiency goals. I don't have them in front of me. They're less ambitious than the goals for commercial buildings because it's a tougher group to reach and to work with. So we have plans in place, for existing buildings to start on those pathways and tools in place for them, like the benchmarking ordinance. We saw 4.5% savings from 2016 to 2017 from existing buildings covered by our benchmarking requirement. Benchmarking is just a requirement to measure energy performance, but that measurement is powerful, and we're starting to see buildings save energy because of that. So there's some elements in the green building ordinance where there's energy efficiency options for how buildings comply when they need a roof permit for existing buildings that can provide them more tools and opportunities to improve energy efficiency. So it's sort of a separate track of work around existing buildings, but I hope that gives you a little bit of insight, and you can see both a summary of the existing building and new building work and all of the goals at denvergov.org/energizedenver.
Yep, great. We definitely need to target both new construction and existing buildings. So I'm glad the city is working on both of those and trying to coordinate those as much as possible. We have 4 questions left. We'll do 2 of them, and then I want to see if Eric Makala, if he is on, if he might answer a couple others. So let me do these, and then I'll see if I can switch it over to Eric if he's there. One is Excel Energy involved, and who's the contact person? They are involved. They've been a really close partner with the city, working with the city of Denver on helping to meet the city's goals. So they will be part of this, and also helping to figure out how this fits in with their own demand side management programs and energy efficiency incentives and so forth. So I don't have the contact person of the on hand, but we can let you know offline for that. And then in case folks can't make it in person, will you have a dial-in or video option? I don't think so, but we can check on that. So I'll let you know about that question specifically. We'll check out the room and see if that's possible. It will be kind of a medium size to large room, so it might be hard to hear the entire discussion, but we could see if there's a possibility there. Okay, the next couple questions, Eric isn't on, but Sean is. So let me see if I can unmute you, Sean. Hold on a second. Sean Dennison with New Buildings Institute. Okay, hold on. I'm unmuting you, Sean, and then let me read the question. Since 90.1 2016 ASHRAE code was only about 7% better for climate zone 5B than the 2013 ASHRAE, does Denver have a target improvement for this code cycle to create a glide path to net zero by 2035? That is, do they have a target improvement over the current IECC 2015? And I know some of that will be decided in which amendments we decide to propose. We decide as a group to propose, but a lot of them do move us down that glide path. And I want to see if Sean has anything to add on that question.
Sure. So part of the point of the stakeholder involvement is to get feedback on the proposals that are being considered, kind of upfront. And that'll give an idea of what a reasonable goal for moving into the next code cycle will be. Now, we are considering proposals that are probably capable of doing 10 to 15%, and just on their own, and the way that they get modified, that could go up or down. So, this is one of those places where getting that feedback can be really helpful to see what we can do in this first step.
Yeah, this is Katrina. I would just add to that I would echo that. We're really looking for stakeholder input around what makes sense to do in this first code cycle. We have 6 code cycles to get to net zero, so we don't need to get all the way there, but we also know that solving climate change requires us to take all the steps that are possible at any given point in time. And so that's where we need your input. What is possible? What can really work well for the market and for developers and be achievable, but take a step towards that goal. And then we'll continue that conversation as we walk each code cycle towards 2035. What is doable this cycle? And so that's where we're really looking for your input.
Right. Great, thanks. One more code-related question for Sean. Will Denver finally move away from energy cost savings for the performance method of compliance for 2018?
So I think that this is one of those things that actually ties back to the question about goals and about the definition of zero energy. That is a critical question for how you define zero energy. And that is, again, it's one of the things that would be good to get feedback from stakeholders. There are a lot of competing definitions for zero energy, and there are a lot of different reasons to go with different energy metrics. And so we really need to find the one that's going to work the best for Denver as Denver tries to reach its own goals. So I would say that that is probably on the table for moving away from that, but it's really about finding the metric that helps Denver meet its goals the best way.
Yep, great, thanks. Anything to add on that, Katrina?
No, I think that's right.
Great. And that's all the questions that we've gotten in. If you do have any more questions, send them on to me and we'll get answers out to you. Otherwise, we hope most of you will be able to stay involved throughout this process to the parts that best fit your insight and your expertise and what you would like to see for Denver and how we get there. So we'll see a lot of you on the 22nd. Before that, you should get an email with some of the ideas that we'll be talking through on the 22nd. There'll be a few sentences on each idea, so we have some more background to them, but it's not an official code language yet. It's just talking through ideas. So look for that and let us know any other questions. And thanks a bunch for all your interest and involvement in this process. We're excited to get it going. And with that, I'll talk to all of you later. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.